What happens when one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces, an actor whose career has been built on charm, resilience, and blockbuster charisma, sits across from a morning show host known for asking the questions others are afraid to? What happens when that carefully constructed mask begins to crack, live in front of millions? You're about to find out, because Will Smith has just broken his silence in an explosive Good Morning America confrontation with Michael Strahan. And trust me, this isn't the Will Smith you think you know. Before we dive into the chaos, make sure you hit that subscribe button to Celebrity Narrator. Like this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and join our growing community of viewers who live for the drama, the intensity, and the stories Hollywood doesn't want you to see. The studio lights were warm, glowing with that polished morning show perfection, but underneath, the tension was already electric. Will Smith adjusted his jacket, the faint glimmer of unease flashing in his eyes before his practiced smile settled in place. He knew why he was there. Everyone knew why he was there. This wasn't a casual sit-down to promote a movie or crack a few jokes about family life. This was about redemption. This was about answers. And across from him, Michael Strahan wasn't going to let him escape with cliches. The first few exchanges were cordial, almost deceptively so. Michael leaned in, his voice smooth, measured, but with a razor edge beneath the warmth. "Will, it's been a while since we've seen you in this setting. People want to hear from you directly. Why now?" Will smiled, but the edges of that smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Because I think the world deserves clarity. I think my family deserves clarity. And honestly, I need it too." It was a carefully rehearsed line, but Strahan didn't flinch. He nodded slowly, holding Will's gaze with a silence that seemed to stretch a little too long for comfort. The audience shifted in their seats. Some leaned forward, sensing the storm gathering. "Clarity about what?" Strahan pressed. His tone wasn't hostile, but it cut. Will's fingers tapped lightly against his thigh, a rhythm betraying the storm beneath his controlled exterior. "About what happened, about who I am, about mistakes, choices. About everything." The weight in his voice drew a hush across the studio. For a moment, it felt like everyone had stopped breathing. Michael tilted his head. Will people still remember that night? The moment. The slap. It's etched into cultural memory now. But what I want to ask you is, what was going through your mind in the seconds before and after? Not the polished PR answer. The real one. The words landed like a thunderclap. The studio audience let out a low, collective murmur, some gasping, others whispering to each other. Cameras zoomed in closer, capturing the tightening of Will's jaw. For the first time, the mask cracked. His eyes flickered with something raw, shame, anger, defiance. It was hard to tell. He leaned forward, clasping his hands together. "You want the real answer? The real one isn't pretty. The real one is ugly. The real one is a man who, in a split second, forgot everything he stood for. I wasn't thinking about millions of people watching. I wasn't thinking about my family, my career, my legacy. I was thinking about protection. About rage. About being tired of being a joke." The silence that followed was suffocating. Even Strahan, usually unflappable, paused, letting the words hang heavy. But then he leaned in, eyes narrowing just slightly. "Protection from what, Will? From a joke about your wife? Or from something deeper? Because to a lot of people, it looked like you snapped, not at Chris Rock, but at the world." Will's lips pressed together, his nostrils flaring as if he were holding back something volcanic. "You don't know what it's like, Michael. To be everybody's hero until you're not. To be the strong one, the funny one, the one people look at and say, he's got it all figured out. And then one crack in the armor, one moment, and suddenly you're the villain. You're the monster." His voice grew louder, more charged. The audience shifted again, some nodding with empathy, others uncomfortable with the rawness spilling across the stage. The control was slipping. Strahan kept his composure, though his tone hardened. "But Will, isn't that what accountability is? Owning that you made a choice. You chose violence in that moment. And people want to know, are you sorry for it, or just sorry for how it made you look?" Gasps echoed through the studio. Someone in the audience audibly whispered, "Oh my God." Will sat back, his chest rising and falling, his hands gripping the arms of the chair. His smile was gone now, replaced by a raw intensity. "You think I'm just worried about my image? You think I'm that shallow? No, man. I'm sorry because I let people down. I let myself down. I betrayed what I stand for. But don't twist this into some easy headline. Don't think you can reduce me to that moment alone." His voice cracked slightly on the last word, and for a second, the vulnerability broke through. But just as quickly, the defiance returned. His eyes locked onto Strahan's with a fire that dared him to push further. Strahan didn't back down. But Will, don't you think people deserve more than apologies and explanations? Don't you think they deserve honesty? Complete honesty. Even if it makes you look worse. The tension was unbearable now. The air felt thick, like the entire studio was holding onto a fragile thread. Will leaned forward again, his hands clasped, his voice lower, but with a dangerous edge. You want honesty? Fine. Honesty is, I don't know if I'm sorry enough. I don't know if I've done enough to make it right. Some days I wake up and wish it never happened. Other days, I think maybe it needed to happen. Maybe people needed to see that I'm not perfect. That I'm human. And maybe that scares the hell out of them. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, and for a moment, no one dared to move. The audience was spellbound, caught between shock and sympathy. Strahan leaned back, his eyes scanning Will's face. He looked almost impressed by the rawness, but also unsatisfied, as though he knew there was still more buried beneath. Will, I think you just opened a door a lot of people aren't ready for. The question is, are you ready to walk through it? Will didn't answer immediately. He stared at the floor, his jaw tightening, his hands trembling slightly. Then he looked up, eyes blazing. I didn't come here to be safe. I came here to be real. The audience erupted, not in applause, but in a mixture of gasps, murmurs, and uneasy chatter. The moment had shifted. It wasn't a polished interview anymore. It was a confrontation, raw and unfiltered, and no one knew where it would go next. The cameras zoomed out as the studio lights seemed to intensify, trapping Will and Strahan in a spotlight of truth. The tension was so thick, it felt like a fight was about to break out, not with fists, but with words sharp enough to cut. And this was only the beginning. The room was alive with tension, the kind of nervous energy that makes every sound sharper, every silence heavier. You could hear the faint hum of the studio cameras, the occasional cough from the audience, the shuffling of feet as if people weren't sure whether they should stay seated or prepare for something bigger. The stage wasn't just a stage anymore, it was a battlefield. Michael Strahan leaned in again, but slower this time, deliberate, measured. He'd drawn blood already, and the audience knew he wasn't finished. His voice was steady, but with the weight of someone pressing deeper into a wound. You say you came here to be real, Will. But being real means going to places that aren't comfortable. So let's go there. That night, you said you acted out of protection. Was it really about Jada? Or was it about you? The question cut through the air like a blade. The audience audibly gasped. Someone in the second row muttered, "Oh, damn." It was the question everyone had thought, but no one had dared to ask with Will sitting just feet away. Will's head dropped slightly, his gaze fixed on the space between his polished shoes. His breathing was audible now, heavy, deliberate, as though he was holding back a flood of words and emotions. Then, with a deep exhale, he looked up. His eyes glistened. Not quite tears, but close, raw enough to draw the audience further in. You want the truth? It wasn't just about Jada. It was about every headline, every joke, every time people thought they had the right to define me, to define my family. It was about years of being polite, of swallowing it down, of telling myself, you're stronger than this, you're bigger than this. But that night I wasn't bigger. I was smaller. I was human. And it terrified me. The studio was silent, save for the low buzz of lights. Michael didn't speak right away. He gave the moment space, letting the weight of Will's words sink in. The audience shifted, some nodding in sympathy, others folding their arms as if unwilling to accept his reasoning. Finally, Michael leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. So, you're saying the slap wasn't about love, but about ego? Will's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing with a flash of defensiveness. Don't reduce it like that. Don't turn it into a headline. It was about survival. About identity. About years of pressure that boiled over in 1 second. Michael tilted his head, pressing. But doesn't survival mean protecting, not destroying? Doesn't strength mean restraint? The words landed like punches, and for the first time, Will's voice rose, sharp and unpolished. Easy for you to say, Michael. You weren't the one being humiliated in front of the world. You weren't the one people turned into a meme, into a joke, into a hashtag. Do you know what it's like to have your pain broadcast, replayed, analyzed, mocked day after day, year after year? Do you know what that does to a man? The audience murmured louder, a ripple of gasps and whispers flowing through the studio. Some people nodded vigorously, others shook their heads, but everyone was leaning forward, glued to the unraveling spectacle. Strahan didn't flinch. He let Will's outburst hang in the air, then spoke with quiet firmness. I know what it's like to be judged, Will. I know what it's like to be in the spotlight. But I didn't put my hands on another man on live television. That was your choice. And the world saw it. The words hit like cold steel. Will blinked, his lips pressed tight, his body tense as if he were fighting the urge to stand up and walk away. Instead, he leaned forward, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened. You think I don't know that? You think I don't wake up every damn morning and relive that moment? But you want to know the worst part? It's not the slap. It's not the punishment. It's not even the jokes. It's the look in my kid's eyes. The way my daughter asked me, Dad, why did you do that? That's what kills me. The crack in his voice echoed through the studio. The audience went silent again, many visibly moved, some even covering their mouths in shock. The camera zoomed in, catching the raw vulnerability on his face. For the first time, Will Smith didn't look like the global superstar, the invincible entertainer. He looked like a father, broken by the disappointment in his own children's eyes. Michael softened just slightly, his tone gentler now, but no less piercing. And what did you say to her? Will swallowed hard, his eyes blinking rapidly as he fought to steady himself. I told her I made a mistake. That sometimes, even the people you look up to the most fall. And that I was going to spend the rest of my life trying to stand back up the right way. A murmur of empathy rippled through the audience, softer now, more emotional than before. The intensity shifted, from confrontation to confession. But Michael wasn't finished. He leaned in again, his eyes steady. Will, you've been silent for so long. Why choose now? Why choose this stage, this audience, to finally open up? Will exhaled deeply, as if the weight of the question was pressing on his chest. Because silence is killing me. Every day I don't speak, people fill in the blanks. They decide who I am. They decide my story. And if I don't sit here, if I don't look the world in the eye and tell the truth, then I'm nothing more than the sum of that one night. The studio lights seemed hotter now, sweat glistening on Will's forehead. The pressure was visible, almost unbearable. The audience couldn't look away. Michael's expression hardened again, sensing that Will was ready for the next push. But what if the world doesn't forgive you? What if they never see you as anything else but that night? The question hung heavy, brutal in its simplicity. The audience gasped again, some even shaking their heads as if Strahan had gone too far. But Will didn't shy away. He leaned forward, his voice low but burning with conviction. Then so be it. If that's my fate, I'll carry it. I'll carry it every day. Because the truth is, I don't deserve forgiveness just because I'm famous. I don't deserve redemption because I've made people laugh for 30 years. I have to earn it. And maybe I'll never earn it. But I'll die trying. The audience erupted, not in applause, but in a swell of murmurs, gasps, even a few shouts of support. Some stood up briefly, overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. Michael let the noise roll for a moment, then raised a hand, signaling calm. His voice was quieter now, but still sharp. Will, do you understand what you're saying? That you may never come back? That the world may never let you? Will nodded slowly, his gaze steady. I understand. And maybe I don't need the world to let me come back. Maybe I just need to learn how to live with myself again. The weight of that line was devastating. It settled over the studio like a blanket of stone, heavy and unshakable. For a moment, even Michael seemed stunned, his lips parting slightly as he searched for his next words. But before he could speak, the audience broke into whispers again, divided, emotional, unsettled. Some were visibly moved, even teary-eyed. Others looked skeptical, arms crossed, unwilling to buy into Will's confession. Michael finally spoke, his voice calm but deliberate. Will, you've said more today than you have in the past year combined. But the truth is, we're only scratching the surface. Because what people really want to know is, what comes next? Who is Will Smith now? Will sat back, his face shadowed under the studio lights, his expression unreadable. He didn't answer right away. The silence dragged on, long enough to make the audience restless. Then finally he leaned forward again, his voice almost a whisper. You'll find out. Because I'm not done yet. The lights seemed to dim around them, the cameras zooming closer, the tension thicker than ever. The confrontation had shifted from anger to revelation, but it was clear, this battle wasn't over. The real explosion was still coming. And as the audience held their breath, the stage was set for the next round of truth. The studio was no longer just a stage, it had become an arena. The air was charged, almost electric, as though every breath carried static. Strahan's questions had pierced deeper than anyone expected, and Will Smith had allowed himself to bleed in front of millions. But the tension hadn't broken, it had only thickened. You could feel the weight of unfinished business hovering above them like a storm waiting to break. Michael Strahan, steady and deliberate, leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on Will as though he were staring down an opponent across a ring. His voice was calm, but beneath it was something sharper, more relentless. Will, you've said you're not done. But the world has already made up its mind, hasn't it? The world has decided you're a villain. That's the box they've put you in. And the question is, can you ever climb out of it? The audience shifted, murmuring among themselves. It was a question people had whispered online, debated on talk shows, dissected in countless articles. And now it was being spoken directly to Will's face. Will's eyes darkened, his expression hardening with a mix of defiance and exhaustion. He leaned forward, his voice steady but carrying the bite of someone tired of being underestimated. Climb out. I don't need to climb out of their box. I never belonged in it. People love to build you up, love to say you're perfect, flawless, untouchable. And then the second you show them you're human, they burn you alive. They don't want truth, Michael. They want a performance. They want me smiling, joking, being the Fresh Prince forever. But that man doesn't exist anymore. Gasps rippled through the audience. Some clutched their mouths, others exchanged wide-eyed glances. The Fresh Prince, the name that had launched him into stardom, discarded in a single breath. Strahan narrowed his eyes, sensing the magnitude of the moment. So, what are you saying, Will? That the Will Smith people knew is gone. Will's voice rose, almost thunderous now. Yes. That man died the night I walked onto that stage. And maybe he needed to. Because I've spent my whole life trying to be who everyone else needed me to be. The good guy. The role model. The safe choice. But underneath that was rage. Was pain. And the world saw it, unfiltered, ugly, real. You want to know who Will Smith is now? He's not your hero. He's not your clown. He's a man who broke, and is still trying to figure out what's left. The words hit like a shockwave. The audience erupted, not in cheers, but in gasps, shouts, and stunned murmurs. A woman in the front row shook her head in disbelief. Another man whispered audibly, "Damn, he's really saying this." Michael held his composure, though even he looked momentarily caught off guard. His voice, however, remained calm, probing. "Will, if that's true, then why are you here? Why sit in this chair? Why not disappear, rebuild privately, instead of doing this, live unfiltered?" Will's eyes burned with intensity. Because disappearing is what cowards do. I'm not running from this. I'm not hiding from the world. You want to see the scars? Fine, here they are. You want to see the pain? Take a good look. I'm not here to protect my image. I'm here to destroy it. The audience gasped again, louder this time. Destroy it? A voice from the crowd echoed, disbelief dripping in every syllable. Will turned, his gaze sweeping across the faces in the audience. For the first time, he wasn't just speaking to Strahan. He was speaking to them, to the millions watching at home, to everyone who had ever judged him from the glow of their screens. His voice carried, heavy with both fury and vulnerability. You all think you know me. You think you own me. But you only know what I've shown you. You only know the movies, the jokes, the interviews where I smiled and told you what you wanted to hear. That wasn't me. That was a version of me I built, so you'd accept me. But I'm done pretending. If you're going to hate me, then hate me for the truth, not the lie I lived for 30 years. The studio was dead silent, the kind of silence that crackles with energy. Even Strahan looked stunned, his lips parting slightly, as though struggling to form his next question. Finally, Michael leaned forward again, his voice quieter, more cautious. Will, do you realize what you're saying right now? Do you realize how final this sounds? Will leaned back, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. His voice softened, but his words carried the weight of inevitability. I realize exactly what I'm saying. I'm burning the house down, Michael. And maybe something honest can grow from the ashes. The audience stirred, divided, some visibly emotional, others visibly uncomfortable. One person clapped once nervously, before stopping when no one joined. Michael's jaw tightened. He wasn't letting go yet. Okay, Will, if you're burning it all down, then let me ask you this. What about Chris Rock? What about the man you struck? Have you looked him in the eye? Have you faced him? The question shifted the energy instantly. The audience gasped again, louder this time, their curiosity reignited. Will froze, his body stiffening as though he'd been physically struck himself. his lips pressed together, his eyes darting downward. For the first time, he looked cornered. The silence dragged on painfully long. Then finally he spoke, his voice low, almost a whisper. "No, not yet." The audience erupted in murmurs, shocked by the admission. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others muttered under their breath. Michael pressed, his tone sharper now. "Why not? You've apologized publicly. You've spoken about it endlessly. But you haven't looked him in the eye? Why?" Will's body trembled, his fists clenched tightly. His voice broke, louder now, raw and anguished. "Because I'm afraid, Michael. Afraid of what I'll see in his eyes. Afraid that it'll confirm everything people say about me. That I'm a monster. That I'm not worth forgiving. And maybe he doesn't owe me forgiveness. Maybe I don't deserve it." The vulnerability was staggering. The audience was silent again, riveted, almost paralyzed by the intensity of the moment. Even Michael looked shaken, his eyes softening as he absorbed the weight of Will's confession. "Will," he began softly, "you can't live in fear forever. Don't you think facing him is the only way to truly move forward?" Will's gaze lifted, his eyes wet, his face taut with emotion. His voice, though unsteady, carried with it a defiant edge. "Maybe. But facing him might also destroy me. And I'm not sure if I'm ready for that." The room was a powder keg now, every word another spark. The audience was glued, some leaning so far forward it looked like they might fall out of their seats. Strahan, sensing the climax approaching, pressed one final time, his voice deliberate, commanding. "Then let me ask you this, Will. If Chris Rock were sitting in this chair right now, looking at you, what would you say to him?" The question landed like a grenade. The audience gasped so loudly it echoed through the studio. All eyes were on Will. The cameras zoomed in, catching the sweat, the trembling hands, the storm of emotions across his face. Will closed his eyes for a long moment, inhaling deeply. When he opened them, his voice shook, but his words came sharp, deliberate, searing. "I'd say, I'm sorry. Not for the cameras, not for the headlines. I'm sorry because I broke something between us that can't be fixed. I stole your dignity in front of the world, and I can't give it back. And I hate myself for that. But I'd also say thank you. Because you forced me to face the truth about myself. And maybe, one day, I'll be strong enough to face you too." The audience gasped again, some audibly whispering, "Wow." Others sat in stunned silence, tears welling in their eyes. The confession was raw, unfiltered, devastating. Michael Strahan, for once, didn't have a response ready. He sat back, his face taut with emotion, his eyes searching Will's as if trying to process what he'd just witnessed. The studio was thick with silence, the kind that makes your chest tighten, the kind that feels sacred. And then, just like that, the tension broke, not with laughter, not with applause, but with a haunting stillness. Everyone in the room knew they had just witnessed something unforgettable, something that would live far beyond the walls of that studio. But deep down, everyone also knew this wasn't the end. The real aftermath hadn't even begun. The silence in the studio after Will's confession was the kind of silence that doesn't just hang in the air. It crushes it. You could hear people breathing. You could hear the faint creak of chairs as audience members shifted, but no one dared speak. The cameras zoomed in on Will's face, raw, strained, and drenched with a vulnerability that no Hollywood script could ever recreate. Michael Strahan sat across from him, frozen for a moment, caught between the role of interviewer and witness to something that felt deeply human, almost sacred. But Strahan was a professional. He cleared his throat, leaning forward slightly, his voice steady but softer now, almost reverent. "Will, you know what you just said? That wasn't just an apology. That was a confession. That was something no one expected to hear today." Will exhaled, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his own words. He nodded slightly, his voice low, exhausted. "Yeah, I didn't come here to play it safe, Michael. I came here to bleed." The audience erupted, not with applause, not with cheers, but with a raw, human sound. Some gasped, others muttered, "Wow," under their breath. A few people even wiped tears from their eyes. The studio had become a church of confession, a courtroom of public opinion, and a theater of spectacle, all at once. Michael tilted his head, his eyes narrowing slightly. "But Will, when you bleed on national television, it's not just you who pays the price. It's your family, your friends, the people who stood by you. Are you ready for what comes after this?" The question hung heavy, and Will took his time before answering. He clasped his hands together, staring at them for a long moment, then looked up with eyes that were no longer angry but resolute. "Ready or not, it's coming. And maybe that's the point. You can't choose the storm. You can only decide whether you'll stand in it or run from it. I'm done running. The words drew a sharp inhale from the audience. A murmur rippled through the room, the kind of energy that said people knew they were watching a turning point in real time. Then Strahan delivered the final blow, the question that would ignite headlines, tweets, and talk shows for weeks to come. Will, if you had one final message to the people watching right now, to the millions who've judged you, defended you, criticized you, what would it be? Will leaned forward, his eyes locked on the camera, as if speaking directly to the viewer at home. His voice was steady, his words deliberate. I'd say this: stop worshiping perfection. Stop demanding it from me, from your idols, from yourselves. We're all broken. We're all flawed. I'm not who you thought I was. I'm not your perfect hero. But I'm real. And if that's not enough for you, then maybe I was never meant to be your hero in the first place. The audience reacted instantly. Some gasped, others applauded despite themselves, while a few shook their heads in disbelief. The energy was chaotic, divided, like the room itself couldn't decide whether to condemn him or embrace him. Strahan, visibly moved, leaned back and let the words sit. The interview had reached its peak, its climax, and nothing more needed to be said. He gave Will a nod, professional but respectful, as if acknowledging that this moment was bigger than either of them. The cameras slowly zoomed out, capturing the two men sitting in the harsh glow of studio lights, the audience buzzing like a hive of conflicting emotions. Producers frantically signaled, debating whether to cut to commercial, but it was too late. The clip had already been immortalized in real time. The interview ended not with applause, not with a clean resolution, but with the heavy hum of chaos. And then the fallout began. Within minutes, social media exploded. Clips from the interview were posted and reposted, dissected and debated. Hashtags trended worldwide. Hashtag Will Smith breaks silence. Hashtag GMA confrontation. Hashtag Will versus Strahan. Some voices defended him, praising his honesty, calling it the bravest moment of his career. Others tore him down further, accusing him of self-pity, of trying to control the narrative. On Twitter, a fan wrote, "Will Smith just bared his soul on live TV. That wasn't an interview, that was a reckoning." But another countered, "Crying on GMA doesn't erase what he did. He's only sorry because he got caught." Instagram filled with memes within the hour. Screenshots of Will's anguished face, paired with captions ranging from sympathetic to cruel. TikTok flooded with reaction videos, creators reenacting the tense back and forth with Strahan, some mocking, some deeply analyzing. News outlets ran with it instantly. The New York Times called it a raw, unprecedented display of accountability and anger. TMZ labeled it Will's TV Meltdown 2.0. Pundits filled the airwaves, debating whether this was the first step in redemption or the final nail in his career's coffin. But the most powerful reactions came from the people in the studio that morning. Audience members went live on their phones, their shaky voices recounting what they had just witnessed. "I was there. I saw Will Smith cry. I saw him shake. I saw him say things I don't think he's ever said before. It didn't feel like TV. It felt like therapy, like we were all inside his head for a minute." Others were harsher. "He's an actor. Don't forget that. He knows how to cry on cue. Don't be fooled. This was a performance." The divide was brutal, passionate, unrelenting. And yet, one thing was clear. Will Smith had done what he set out to do. He wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't silent. He wasn't safe. He was raw, vulnerable, and more polarizing than ever. The next morning, the clip dominated every morning show, every late-night monologue, every trending feed. Strahan himself was praised for his composure, his refusal to let Will off the hook, his calm but cutting questions that steered the interview into uncharted territory. But for Will, the road ahead was uncertain. Studios hesitated, brands deliberated, and fans argued endlessly. Redemption or ruin, nobody knew which path lay ahead. Back in the quiet aftermath of the studio, long after the cameras had cut, Will sat alone in his dressing room. The echoes of his own words still haunted the air. "I'm not your hero, but I'm real." And maybe for the first time in years, he believed it. Now it's your turn. What do you think of Will Smith's explosive confrontation with Michael Strahan? Was this the first step in redemption, or the final unraveling of a Hollywood icon? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Celebrity Narrator for more dramatic, cinematic stories of the moments that shock the world. Because if this interview proved anything, It's that sometimes the most powerful scenes aren't written in Hollywood. They're lived raw and unforgettable.